All right, guys, we are back for week 8 of the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. Yes, this prediction and breakdown, or predictions and breakdown, I should say, is coming out pretty late. Sorry, just been kind of busy lately. Weird work schedule, so have to get it out when I can. But we're trying to end this season close to 80% accuracy with 3 weeks left. We're at 69% right now, 68, 69% correct through 7 weeks. I feel like that's pretty decent for how some people have been doing on Contender Series. So we're going to kick it off. First fight on the main card between Christian Savoy taking on Jacoby Smith, or Jacob Smith. 10-1-1 for Savoy and 8-0 undefeated record for Smith. I'm going to be honest, man, Savoy is not bad. I think a lot of people would come in here and just immediately assume that Jacob Smith is going to run right through him. And although he does have the skill set to do just that, and especially with his takedowns, his wrestling, his top control, he can definitely do it. But I've seen portions of Jacob Smith where if he can't land that big KO early, he starts to get a little bit sloppy on the feet. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Elijah Smith, where if he can't put you down early, if he can't use, his athletic explosiveness to hurt you early, he's going to leave himself open for some counter shots. He has decent footwork. He moves good laterally, moves in and out, at a decent clip. He's pretty solid with that. Pretty smooth on the feet is Smith. But I think Savoy has a good jab. He has a good one too. Good low kick. I've seen him go cross hook and land a good check hook and knock his opponents down. And I think that Jacob Smith will be there to be hit once you get past the 1.5. 2 rounds, 3 rounds mark. Like, the later this fight goes, I think it goes into the favor of Javoy Smith, especially when it comes, Christian Savoy. I cannot talk. I just combined both their names. But I think it goes in the favor of Christian Savoy the later the fight goes, if it stays on the feet. But I also think that the wrestling, takedowns, forward pressure, and grappling of Smith can take the fight down if the fight isn't going the way he wants to or needs it to go when it comes to the striking game. So I'm going to take Jacob Smith. I'm going to take him by a TKO. I think he hurts Savoy on the feet. I think he hurts him, but I'm going to go with a ground and pound TKO. I think he gets in the mount and lands ground and pound and finishes him off, or potentially gets his back, flattens him out, and lands ground and pound that way. But like I said, Savoy is good. Good jab, good 1-2, decent check hook. Like, he's pretty long, pretty rangy. He's not terrible, but I think the athleticism of Smith, the forward pressure, the explosiveness, the power that he possesses, and paired with the wrestling game, like I said, if the striking doesn't go the way he needs it to go, I'm going to go with Jacob Smith. So give me Jacob Smith, second round ground and pound TKO over Christian Savoy. But don't be surprised if Savoy hurts him. All right, next fight up is going to be Torres Finny with his third and hopefully final shot on the Contender Series, taking on Abdullah Ramy. Now, we don't know too much about Ramy, but what we do know is that this guy is mean on the feet. He is mean, he is nasty, and he comes forward and will put combinations on you. He's a very solid kickboxer, and everything he throws is pretty much 100% power. Good hooks, good crosses, very solid and explosive head kicks. And, if Finny strikes with him, I'm going to be the first to say it. I think Ramy can knock him out, but I feel like we know what Finny's going to do. He's going to try to land some strikes on the feet, eventually change levels, close the distance, and get the takedowns. And we know that Torres Finny is going to be at an advantage when it comes to the grappling in this fight. And that's going to be the smart thing to do, is to take him down, is to control from the top position, land ground and pound, and look to get a ground and pound stoppage or look to get a submission on the floor. That's where he's going to have the advantage over this guy in Ramy. But Ramy on the feet is live. The minute the fight starts, as long as it lasts on the feet, Ramy is live to knock out Torres Finny. I do not think Finny has the best defense. I think Finny is very short. He, has a decent sized reach, but he's very short. And with the explosive kickboxing that Ramy possesses, I would not be surprised if Ramy knocked Torres Finny out. Now, that would be tragic for a guy like Torres Finny to get 3 shots on the Contender Series and then lose your final shot, because I feel like if he's not impressive here, Dana White might not bring him back to the Contender Series. He might have to win 5, 6, 7 more fights, and that just might not be possible for a style like Torres Finny. He's short, he's stocky, very strong, very explosive wrestling, good overhands, big looping punches to close the distance to get the takedowns and then control you from the top. top, look for submissions, and ground and pound you along the way, kind of tenderize you. But like I said, standing on the feet against a guy like Ramy is a recipe for disaster for the contract aspirations of Torres Finny. I'm not saying that Ramy cannot be hurt. Torres Finny is explosive, but if he tries to stand and strike to prove a point to Dana White that he can do it, he's gonna get hurt and he probably gets knocked out. The combinations, punctuating combos with low kicks, the head kicks, the shots to the body, ripping up top. Ramy, he doesn't have the best experience, but the guy's no pushover, and he is a better striker than Torres Finny on the feet. And if this was a straight kickboxing match, Torres Finny would probably be a pretty sizable underdog. So you have to look at the fact that this isn't a kickboxing match. This isn't a straight wrestling match. This is a mixed martial arts contest. And I think the wrestling of Finny might be too much for Ramy. I think the smart thing for Finny to do is to get those takedowns, land ground and pound, and control from the top. I'm going to go with Torres Finny to get a submission in this fight. Give me Torres Finny round 2 arm triangle choke submission. But from a betting standpoint, I would almost want to throw a little bit on Ramy knockout round 1 and Ramy KO round 1, round 2. I really think that he has a shot to knock Torres Finny out because I do not think his striking is up to par. And the funny thing is, and I don't say this out of any sign of disrespect towards Finny, but I think even if he wins on the Contender Series and gets to the UFC, I don't think this guy is going to do well in the UFC. So, take that with what you will. I'm going to go Torres Finny, second round arm triangle choke submission. But from a betting perspective, it's almost a Ramy KO 1-2. Up next, you got a battle in the bantamweight division between the Black Spartan and David Martinez taking on Xavier Franklin. What's the nickname for Xavier Franklin? Mr. Benjamin. So you got Mr. Benjamin, Xavier Franklin, taking on David Martinez, whose nickname is the Black Spartan. I think this is one of your best fights on the entire card for Contender Series this week. Martinez is very, very good. He's very technical. He switches stances between orthodox and southpaw. He can throw kicks from both orthodox and southpaw. He has good boxing combinations. He throws in combination, and he's very hard to time and very hard to trap. This guy also has vicious knockout power. And it's not just kicks. He can knock you out with his boxing as well. He can put combinations together very, very solidly. And that's not even a good word. He can put combinations together at a very good clip, I'll say. But one thing I noticed about Martinez is he likes to hook off the jab and jab off the hook. And that will show you a very high-level striker. That's something you guys can look for. If guys go jab, hook, right hand, or jab, hook, cross, hook, jab, hook, cross, like switching between a hook and a jab and a hook, it seems like a very small thing, but it's something that really shows how high level you are when you mix your combinations together. If I go 1, 2, 3, jab, cross, bop, 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 it switches up the tempo, and the straight punches of the jab is going to line up the cross. The hook is going to move the opponent right into the cross, and that's something I like from Martinez. Martinez also has a vicious wheel kick knockout on the regional scene. I believe it was for Combate America or Combate Global, something like that. Vicious wheel kick. This guy can mix it up. He can mix it up on the feet. He moves well. And I think Xavier Franklin is a good fighter too. From what I've seen, this guy can go for takedowns. He can, get you to the ground, but he likes to stand and strike on the feet as well, and he has a lot of power. This is going to be a case of, I believe the better technical fighter is Martinez. I think the fighter who has more finishing upside is Martinez, but I also think Xavier Franklin uses a good jab. He switches between orthodox and southpaw, but the one thing I noticed is that he's very good at noticing when his opponent switch stance and switching up the strikes that he throws. It also shows a very high fight IQ on the side of Franklin, where if he's orthodox and the opponent's orthodox, he'll throw his jab. He'll throw the right hand, throw the low kick. If the opponent switches southpaw, you'll see him throw that straight down the middle. You'll see him switch from the jab to the check hook. You'll see him move to get the outside angle. And he moves very well, very good as well. He has good flow, good stance changes, good movement. And I don't think that he's a pushover. I know that Martinez is the favorite, but I wouldn't be surprised if Franklin was able to do something here and hurt Martinez, but I think Martinez is just a little bit too technical for a guy like Xavier Franklin. I think he mixes up his stance, changes his angles, his fakes and feints at a very high level. This guy's a very high-level fighter, and he can hurt you with not just his hands, he can hurt you with his feet, he can mix up his combos, and you're not safe at any point against a guy like David Martinez, and that's why I have to go with Martinez. I think that I don't see Franklin surviving long enough to be able to hurt Martinez, where I see Xavier Franklin walking into a big shot from Martinez and getting hurt. Franklin's good. He's technically good. He has a lot of power as well. If Martinez leaves his chin there, he can be hurt and can get knocked out. But I think the technical prowess, the finesse, and the ability to mix it up between the boxing and the kickboxing and being dangerous at all angles, I think that's going to be the key for Martinez. So give me David Martinez to defeat Xavier Franklin via a second round knockout. I'm going to go with a front kick to the face. I'm mixing it up. It's either going to be a front kick or a cross into the rear head kick. He's going to do something with a kick. It's going to catch Franklin on the chin and knock him out. If Franklin gets in close and pushes him against the cage, he could also land a knockout punch. But I got to go with David Martinez. Give me David Martinez, second round front kick KO. All right, now we're at the co-main event, I guess you could say, for this week's Contender Series. We've got a battle in the featherweight division between Carlos Calderón taking on Alberto Montes, the Promise. You've got the Promise taking on the Chief, or Chief versus the Promise. I think these guys are actually pretty similar with the way they put their game together. The only thing I will say is that I think Montes is much more explosive than Calderón. I also believe that Montes can get hurt as well, though. You know, I think Montes mixes up his combinations pretty well. He has a lot of submissions, or at least two of his most recent wins in his pro career came in the first round via an anaconda and a Darce choke. So you see that this guy likes to work a lot from that front headlock position. But I also think Carlos Calderón has good jiu-jitsu, and the one thing I do like about him is the fact that he's pretty loose on the feet. He switches stances, he moves well, he does the right things. It's just he gets caught with big shots early. I've seen him get caught and get dropped in fights, come back and win via submission. I've seen him get hurt early and not be able to come back. But I've also seen Alberto Montes get knocked out viciously with a left hook into a right hand and put on ice and knocked out cold. Both these guys fight with their hands down. Both these guys move pretty well, you know, laterally in and out, switch stances between orthodox and southpaw. I would say that the explosiveness with the kicking is much higher on the side of Alberto Montes, and I think the knockout ability overall is much higher on the side of Alberto Montes. But I do believe that the volume might be on the side of a guy like Carlos Calderón. He's very loose, very technical, moves around pretty well, but he'll just throw things out there. And I feel like, yes, it leaves you open for counters, but it might give a guy like Montes trouble, and it might make it hard for him to be able to set up his shots and be able to clip him and hurt him on the feet. Another thing about a guy like Montes is if you really look at his fighting career, the last time he fought was in June of 2024, so not too long ago. Before that, it was September of 2023. But prior to that, he lost. This is the fight where he got knocked out in against Ira Lukowski, and he got knocked out. That was on December 17th, 2021. So he almost took 2 full years off. And then when he came back, he only fought twice. In September of 2023 and June of 2024. So, you know, like an 8-month break, but before that, pretty much a 2-year break almost. So, you know, you really got to take that into consideration when looking at this fight. You know, how is Montes going to look? Because he hasn't been the most active fighter. And then when you look at a guy like Calderón, 6-2 as a professional. His last fight was in June of 2024. Before that, September of 2023. So pretty similar, but he had 2 fights prior to one of his last fights where he lost via decision and then lost to Montes Askar, who's actually from my neck of the woods. I do know him personally, and, you know, he got submitted. But he has good jiu-jitsu, does Carlos Calderón. He'll go for arm bars. He'll take your back. He'll threaten one way and then sink the arm under the neck in the other way. He's a very good scrambler. He gets into very unorthodox scrambles on the ground, and I feel like he might be able to catch a guy like Montes in a submission because we don't know how good Montes Montes' jiu-jitsu is from the bottom. We don't know how good his jiu-jitsu is when he's, on his back. Is he just good from that front headlock position? Is that the best way for him to get his submissions? Because it comes via Darce choke, it comes via Anaconda choke, and usually it's going to be off the opponent panicking and panic shooting and leaving his neck out there, or you getting backed up with the explosive striking of Montes and then getting up and then allowing him to close the distance, snap down, and take you to snap down city and go for either a Darce or an Anaconda. I think this fight is closer than the line would entail. I think Carlos Calderon is a live fighter. I think, like I said, he has more volume than a guy like Montes. Been a little bit more active than Montes, at least from what I can see. And I don't really think you know what to expect, because we have seen Montes get knocked out cold before, but we've also seen Carlos Calderon get clipped, get rocked early in fights, but find a way to come back. I'm going to go with Carlos Calderon. It might not be the most popular pick. He might get knocked out. He might get rocked. He might get stopped early. But I feel like this is a guy who does get hurt, but he can hang in a fight. He can come back. He has good enough jiu-jitsu. He defends jiu-jitsu pretty well. This might be a bad pick, but I think he can get it done. I know he's been submitted before, but give me Carlos Calderon to win by a third round TKO, maybe a submission. I think he breaks him late, kind of like Daniel Frunza. I think Carlos Calderon is going to break Alberto Montes down the stretch, survive a sketchy first couple rounds, start to pick up the volume, start to put the combinations together, and, obviously the explosiveness of Montes is legit, but I feel like Calderon's pace, his pressure, his scrambling ability is going to give Montes some trouble and will eventually break him the later the fight goes. So give me Carlos Calderon. Give me the Chief to defeat Alberto Montes. I'm going to go with a third round TKO. I think he's going to hurt him, break him, drop him, and get him out of there. So give me Carlos Calderon, third round TKO over Alberto Montes. All right, and for the final fight on Week 8 of the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, you've got a battle in the light heavyweight division between the undefeated fighter in Dayar Nurgozhay taking on Bartosz Sedwick, who comes back with a record of 8-2-1. For Nurgozhay, he's a decent boxer. That's the thing I like about this guy the most. He mixes up his combos well. He throws in combination. But the one thing I don't like is that the longer the fights go, he kind of slows down heavily when it comes to output and volume on the feet. But the one thing about a guy like Dayar is that he's able to get takedowns. He's got very good wrestling, very good top control, and even though he might not be that active with submissions, he will go for at least submissions from the top, and we'll get to why I said that later. But he lands ground and pound. He's looking for punches. He's looking for hammer fists. He's looking for elbows. He's a really solid wrestler. I believe him to be a much better wrestler than Sedwick. Bartosz Sedwick. I believe he's a much better wrestler than him, at least in this matchup. But I do think that the volume of Sedwick could give a guy like Nurgozhay some problems, or Nurgozhay some problems in the second and third round. I think that Dayar does have a win over a guy who is a former champion in the PFL in Emiliano Sordi. He was able to win that fight via TKO, and he showcased his short, crisp, tight boxing. It doesn't look the most like the greatest technically at first when you look at it, but you see this guy has snap on his punches. He turns his punches over pretty well. He'll kind of throw like Russian style, like shovel hooks and uppercuts and little short hooks on the inside that'll hurt his opponent, and that's what led to him hurting Emiliano Sordi in the first round. But even though Emiliano Sordi is a good win, he's 24-13. But when you really look at his record, he's got 2 wins and 5 losses in his last 7 fights. So, yes, he's losing to pretty high-level competition, but he also got TKO'd by Corey Hendricks, who was a pretty sizable underdog in that bout as well. And then he won a fight against Marcus Perez, but we know that Perez was in the UFC and wasn't UFC level. When I look at this fight, I think the later the fight goes, it goes to the side of Bartosz Sedwick. Sedwick has better high kicks. He's very good at throwing, cross lead head kick, 1-2 roll head kick, breaking off the clinch with head kicks. If he pushes Nurgozhay up against the cage, he probably can land head kicks on the way out. And I do worry about the volume of Sedwick I do worry about the volume for Nurgozhay against Sedwick when we get into the midpoint of the second round, when we get into the third round. If this fight is pushed, past the midpoint of the second round into the third, and it's mainly a striking match, I have to side with a guy like Bartosz Sedwick in that style of fight. But if it's pushed into the second and the third round and it's a heavy wrestling pace, a grinding pace from Dyer, then you got to go with Dyer. It just depends on how the fight plays out. What I will say, which I touched on earlier, but I said we would bring it up, is that Dyer has decent submissions off his back, man. He'll go from armbar to triangle to omoplata, switch back to the triangle. This guy's active off of his back with his jiu-jitsu, and I think that the wrestling is going to be the biggest advantage for him in this fight, but I also think he can compete with Sedwick on the feet. It's just going to be the volume later on in the fight that is going to, give people who are backing a guy like Dyer some concern, because I do think he has higher output. He switches stances, he throws those head kicks off the break, and he puts his combinations together well, better than Dyer later on in the fight, midpoint of the second, third round. He uses his jab very well, but he also gets hit a lot. I think that the defense of Sedwick isn't the greatest, but the more you hit him, the more he starts to kind of roll with shots, pull back. He kind of reminds me of a Yuri Prohaska. Now, I'm not saying he's on his level, but the style is pretty similar. I get some, flashbacks to Yuri Prohaska with the hands down, the movement, the footwork, moving his head, pulling away from shots. But I do think the wrestling of Dyer is going to cause him some trouble. And I do think that Bartosz Sedwick is going to get hurt on the feet. I think he's going to get hurt on the feet and then eventually get TKO'd in this fight. If it goes to a decision, you might want to take Bartosz Sedwick by split decision. Maybe you take Sedwick round 3 TKO, because like I said, if it gets later on in the fight, that I do think it goes to the side of Sedwick. He's not a bad fighter, but he gets hit a lot. I don't believe he's going to have the defensive wrestling to stop the takedowns and top control of Dyer, but I'm going to go with a ground and pound TKO for Dyer Nurgozhay. I'm going to go with a second round ground and pound TKO for Dyer Nurgozhay, however you want to say his name. And that's going to be my pick for the main event of the 8th week of the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series 2024. I hope you like my predictions. Leave me your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and lock up a ninja choke on the notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from the premier mixed martial arts and pro wrestling channel on YouTube. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out.